Thank you, Suzanne. Boy, isn't Suzanne amazing? She is great. And your church is great. I love this place. It's beautiful. We love Houston, and we are blessed to be here. So thank you for having me and my family. You know, that video right there gets me a little bit emotionally because I remember seeing it up close. And there was one kid on there who stole my heart that night. It was very interesting. Before the game, this is probably my favorite memory from the game. Before the game, the spirit line is there, and you heard the one kid say, "I figured we would go around it." Well, the spirit line is here, and they're back. It's right in front of them, and they see the spirit line, and they keep edging around, trying to get out of the way, and they keep looking around, but there's no other team because our team's on the other end. And they're looking around, and they're figuring somebody's going to run through, right? Some midget team or something, not them. And I'll never forget this really interesting moment that when I saw it, it made me extremely emotional. And it's hard not to get emotional now thinking about it, but there was this dad, one of our dads, and he's looking at this kid, their quarterback. Kid's name was Isaiah, and he started doing this. And it was interesting how that kid looked like he was about 2 or 3 years old in his eyes, like you were giving a new bike to a kid who had never had one. And his face was saying, "You mean that's for me? And it's all mine?" That's what he looked like. And he really led the charge through the line with tears in his eyes, and all of his teammates followed, and you saw the result up there. Isn't that interesting? That's my all-time favorite moment of the series. We play it every year now. It's called the One Heart Bowl, so we have them on the schedule. Obviously, we can't stop playing them now, right? So, the best stat. I usually am not very big on stats, although some coaches are. But here's a great stat for you. The recidivism rate is about 80%. When a child is released, they come back within 6 months, 8 out of 10 of them. And why is that? Well, because we take them from the prison, we take them to the same neighborhood, drop them off and say, "Good luck." And they come right back. Of the kids that have played in the One Heart Bowl, I do not know of one kid who, after being released, has come back to Gainesville. Is that incredible? And there's really no way to explain that. They just don't come back. And it might be the excitement of having someone cheer you on by name. We print off their rosters and pass it out to our fans. And you saw my first kid up here who was talking. His name is Jordan Dunnington. And he said, "Boy, Coach, this sure is weird. I could hear my dad yelling for me to get tackled." So I don't know how he was feeling about it that night, but the Gainesville kids were feeling pretty good. You know, this thing is a blessing from God in this sense, and only this sense. First of all, I get way too much credit for this. I can tell you right now. You just understand, I sent an email, and I saw it as a ministry opportunity, but none of it happens if our parents didn't cooperate. So the Faith family deserves a lot more credit than I do, number one. Number two, didn't know the media was going to be there. They cover us from time to time. We've won here and there, so they show up for some games, and they just happened to be at this game. And they didn't report on who won. They actually reported on what happened, and exploded from there. But the best thing about this is the platform for ministry has been expanded. For instance, I'm in Houston, Texas, talking to you today. So the platform for ministry that I normally have is all the kids that I coach, the teams at our school. I teach adult Sunday school. So you have a platform for ministry in your life, and what God did is He reached down and touched something, and the platform exploded. For instance, I got a request to speak on a radio show, and by this time, the time that I got this request, I had spoken about 50, 60 times on the radio. And so I almost didn't do this one, but my assistant tricked me into doing it, really. And it sounded like Outback Steakhouse was calling me. Have you heard their commercials, the Australian accent? And I turned it down 2 or 3 times. I wanted to talk to them. It's just that they were picking such weird hours. And it's because they were in Australia. So You want me to wake up at what time? So I took this interview, and I almost missed a great opportunity by not taking it. So I get on the radio, and I find out that it's not just a radio station, not another radio station, but it's a Christian radio station. And they're the powerhouse Christian radio station in Australia. And when I get on the phone, the lady says, "You're about to speak to the continent." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "We have 341 sister stations, and they're equidistant apart across the entire continent. And for 30 minutes, at a very odd time, I might add, all I did was keep sharing the gospel with the entire continent of Australia. And every question they asked seemed to force me to keep sharing the gospel." Isn't that amazing? So God expands the platform. I had been doing some requests and some radio things for a couple of weeks when I got a call from a radio station, and they were everything that I stand for, they were against. They were anti-Christian, anti-American values. And so when you are anti-Christian, anti-American values, you're on the way opposite side of me. I'm red, white, and blue, and I believe in the cross. And this group was trying to get me there on the radio and ask me questions, and to their audience demonstrate that I think what they were trying to do was get some bozo coach from Texas on the phone and make him look like a knothead on the phone. That's what I think. Now, this was up in North Texas, this radio station, up in New York. That's in North Texas. And so I get on the phone with this group, and an atheist calls in while I'm on the phone. And I'll never forget this lady. Her name was Tricia. And she starts just ripping Christianity live. And the host seems to be pushing this. At that time, little bells were going out. "Coach Hogan, I think you've been had here." But what happened is they picked an argument with me. And so I started to argue. Not that I enjoy it, but this was fun, I must admit. And I demonstrated absolute truth to them live on the radio, and it made the host furious. It made Tricia, the atheist who called in, cry, and I got a lot of emails saying, "That was great!" I didn't know there was absolute truth. God expands the platform, and that's what's happened as a result of this. One interesting thing is my wife Amy, and I were invited to go to the Super Bowl, and it was the Super Bowl in Tampa between the Cardinals and the Steelers, the dreaded Steelers. And so we went down there, and we had a great opportunity. We got invited to Radio Row. Radio Row is in a room about this big, and you can't walk because the tables are about this close together, and it's radio outlets from around the nation. So basically, I got to witness to the entire nation. I'd go over to San Diego, and we'd talk about how great God was. All the while, the host is just cringing, and I loved it. And then we'd go over to Seattle, and we'd talk about how great God was. And I can just see him just doing this, and isn't Jesus great? And I'm just forcing it on. But I wouldn't do the interview if they didn't let me represent Christianity. So I had everyone. And it was a great experience. We did that, NFL Sirius Radio and ESPN Radio. Pretty interesting. We were invited to Athletes in Action breakfast, fellowship breakfast, the morning of the Super Bowl in the Sun Dome there in Florida. There were 7,000 people, and I got to get up and speak to those people and inject some hope there. And I found out later 1.25 million saw it around the country and around the world. And every single military personnel in the world, American military personnel, watched it. I mean, on the boats, in the desert. Isn't that cool? It was a great opportunity. Something interesting about the Super Bowl trip that people do not know, the commissioner, this guy's a powerful guy. He's the one who invited us. And it was interesting. We went in this rectangle room, and we came in on this corner of the rectangle, and he was in that corner. So I walked in, and he had about 30 people around him. And he wasn't looking. He was looking that way. And right when Amy and I walked in the door, all 30 people just turned and stared right at us. And he had all these little guys with earpieces that looked kind of like this. I think they were carrying more than earpieces, though. And he walked right over, shook my hand, talked to me. It was really interesting how he commanded the presence of the entire Super Bowl crowd. And so he was an interesting person. But I'll tell you, one of the best things about the Super Bowl was watching my wife turn into a very strange person. I have to tell them this. There are 3 kinds of people that get into the Super Bowl Media Center. Just 3, okay? One old coach told me, Hogan, there's 3 kinds of people. People who know what's happening, people who make things happen, people who watch things happen, and people who don't know what's happening. And these 3 people in the media center were all the people from the teams, so the players, coaches, water boys, everybody who was on the team. The second group is media, and the third group is the people who have bribed a way into the media center. And I'm not joking about that. I saw it live. Well, Amy and I got an invitation from the commissioner, so we're walking along in there, and something happened to her. She's really a normal, down-to-earth Texas girl, but she became obsessed with this media center, so she got out her camera, and she's wanting to take pictures of famous people. And I'm walking along looking at her, and she's just on the prowl, okay? So we're walking down the main corridor, and I watch her. She's just shoving through people and looking around, pushing people out of the way. And I'm looking at her, laughing. I said, Amy, that guy you just shoved out of the way, his name is Jerry Rice. You might want to take a picture of him. So she turns around. He's just the greatest receiver in NFL history. So we're walking along, and she's waiting impatiently for this guy to get through with the water fountain. Okay, and he stands up and walks off, and she's looking at him like he's in her way. It was Marcus Allen. She didn't take his picture either. It's pretty funny. We went outside the media center, and we were trying to get back to our hotel, and there was this tall guy over by over by the curb, and he's pointing here and doing this and talking, and people are walking up and talking to him. So she starts heading that way with her camera. So I grab her, and I'm like, Amy, that's a cab driver. So anyway, it was pretty interesting. We had another interesting little deal there, too. There was a scalper. You know, it's illegal to scalp tickets outside the Super Bowl in certain areas. And there was a guy who was, he was trying to get tickets, and he was being real secretive. Okay, so he's like in the bushes and around the corner, and you walk by, and he whispers to you. He says, I want to buy your tickets. And he whispers, and people are just, and everybody knows what's going on. They walk by, this guy comes out, and you're not supposed to. There's police everywhere. And because they're, guarding whatever they're guarding at the Super Bowl, security. And he keeps doing this, and I see the guy, and I see what he's doing, and we just keep walking. And I don't know if he's going to ask us or not. But he steps out of the brush and says, I'd like to buy your tickets. Or he mumbles something to Amy. And she said, what? Real loud. And he's looking at her, and he's like, I just, nothing. And she's following, what do you need? What, huh? And here come the police, And this guy's, and I'm grabbing her by the arm, come with me. Pretty interesting. It was fun. I'll take you again if we ever go again. It was great entertainment. I'm supposed to give you the details on some of this stuff, so I'm going to do that right now. You saw in the fall of 2011, there's a major motion picture coming out. You can see that at oneheart.com. And the One Heart Project, there's something going on at the One Heart Project at the same website, www.oneheart.com, that's very interesting. It is a program called Letters from the Heart. And we're seeking participants to write letters to these kids. You wouldn't believe how many kids sit in there, and weeks and months and years go by, nothing from home. Nothing. Nothing from aunts, nothing from uncles, nothing from grandparents, nothing. Can you imagine that? Turn back the clock, be 16 or 17, and sit there day after day. And what's worse is a couple get mail, and the majority sit there and watch with envy as they get to open something from somebody they love. So at oneheart.com, we're looking for people to participate in that. There's one lady who has written, she's got 15 or 20 kids, and when she writes to them, she gets something in the mail as fast as the United States Postal Service gets it back. They all respond because they're just dying for somebody to believe in them and talk to them. And so you may check that out. We do have some books out here, too. There's a guy named David Thomas from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram who originally, he's the guy who broke the story. He was there at the game that night. It's interesting how God works. His kids now attend Grapevine Faith, and he followed us the year before. We went to the state championship game, and then the Tyndale picked up the book, and they said, well, you have to include the Gainesville game. So they included one game from the following year, and so the books are outside. And I think you can get those at Amazon for $14 or $15 as well.